circumstances are lost, but George and Victoria both died when Jimmy was very young. And he was out of Childsburg in a flash. He went to live with one of his sisters in Lexington, which happened to be the hub of America's horse racing universe, the center of its biggest horse-breeding state. All around East Lexington, Jimmy found his heroes, America's great black jockeys. Now forgotten, they were once known across the land. They had begun as slaves. They came off the Old South's big horse farms or from plantations that happened to have racing stables, too, and they wound up dominating America's first professional sport, from colonial times to the Civil War. Theirs was a strange world, even within that strangest of worlds, American slavery. While still slaves, a few of the best competed to the applause of tens of thousands of white and black Americans, from New Orleans to New York, and made the sporting news the next morning. These slaves lived adventurous lives of travel, excitement, and public praise that other Americans, white or black, could only dream of. They even achieved what felt like freedom, if only for those minutes on a horse, when the only race that mattered was the one around the track, when the only colors that counted were the colors on their backs, their stables' racing colors. Several moved up to training horses, and a few to managing major stables, hiring and firing the black and white help, running the entire business, because the white owners didn't know how, all while still trapped in slavery. They first appeared on the scene decades before the American Revolution. One of them, Austin Curtis, was America's first great professional athlete and star of the colony's first premier racing region, along the raging Roanoke River on the Virginia-North Carolina border. Like all the others, he is unknown to historians, and you will not find him in any textbook. A brilliant tactician, Curtis made his owner, a North Carolina founding father named Willie Jones, the richest horseman in America. They got along as slave and master, formed the nation's first brilliant athlete-manager combination. Curtis was freed for services to America during the Revolution, services that included the extremely dangerous job of keeping Jones's valuable thoroughbreds out of the hands of the then-conquering British cavalry. Dumped in Charleston off a slave ship right after the Revolution, the teenaged hunchback called Simon became the most celebrated rider across the South, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi. Before 1810, he was brought to Tennessee, where he became the invincible nemesis of General Andrew Jackson. With a mare named Haney's Maria, Simon beat every horse Jackson could throw at him. The wisecracking, banjo-strumming Simon had a wicked mouth, and he was so brilliant in the saddle he could get away with turning it on anybody, the bigger the better. One day, the 6'1" General Jackson issued an order to the 4'6" slave jockey. "Now, Simon, when my horse comes up and is about to pass you, don't spit your tobacco juice in his eyes and in the eyes of his rider, as you sometimes do," said the future President of the United States. "Well, General," said Simon, his famous whine dripping sarcasm, "I've rode a good deal agin your horses, but," and here he dropped a shit or some other oath, "none were ever near enough to catch my spit." When Jackson left the White House after winning his wars against state nullification of federal laws, against the Bank of the United States, and against Congress, not to mention the British Navy at the Battle of New Orleans, somebody asked Old Hickory if there was ever anything he couldn't beat. "Nothing that I can remember," Jackson said, in the ultimate compliment to Simon, "except Haney's Maria." Jackson actually brought his own slave jockeys to the White House and operated a top-level racing stable on the grounds, the only time the White House was ever a major sports power. Another slave jockey, Charles Stewart, raced up and down the East Coast before he became an assistant trainer in Virginia and proceeded to buy his future wife and her children. Free African Americans often bought their loved ones out of slavery, but Stewart was a slave who owned slaves. A few years later, his owner sent him west to breed his stallion, Medley, and the two of them, man and horse, walked 600 miles through the Cumberland Gap and on to Kentucky. After single-handedly managing a major breeding service there, he went on to Louisiana and became the manager of that state's top racing stable, employing